less can be more. If Elizabeth Less marries Roger Moore, then Elizabeth Less could be Elizabeth Moore, Elizabeth Less, Elizabeth Moreless, Elizabeth Less Moore, or Elizabeth and a totally new last name. In this time of pandemic, we feel that we have lost many things, and we certainly have. But what if we were to look at this time as an opportunity to grow, to make more from the less that we are experiencing? Like Elizabeth Less marrying Roger Moore, less becomes more. In our biblical text, Jesus' response time was less than desirable. He was late and Lazarus had died and was already stinky. But what if Jesus came quicker? It could have appeared that Lazarus had only fallen asleep and Jesus' words or touch woke him up from that sleep. But when Lazarus became stinky, it was clear to all that he had been dead for some time. At Jesus' time, people believed the spirit of a person remained with him for 3 days and then left. Waiting 4 days meant that it would take more than just uniting the spirit with the body, because the spirit had already left. A less responsive Jesus left the opportunity for a miracle. Lazarus comes forth rather than Lazarus wakes up. What can the church learn from this? Less can be more, and less can give necessity for something different. In the naming of Elizabeth, we will focus on less becoming more and on less becoming something different. If the church is to grow in this difficult time, we must do more of the things that we did less of and add something to that is different. It is like the story of a violinist who started playing normally, and as his strings broke one at a time, he finished playing the piece of music on only one string. The one string became more than it ever had been, and the audience was amazed at the skill of the violinist. Less became more. If the violinist had limited his playing to only the notes that were commonly played on each string, the piece of music would have been diminished. I firmly believe that living the authentic Christian life promotes health both physically and spiritually. As our brains age, if we do not learn new things, we are left with a decline in mental ability. If we learn new things, the decline of mental function is offset by the forming of new neural pathways. With aging, our thought response time becomes longer, but this can be offset by better organizing how we store memories in our brains. Less can be more when we cook at home with fewer ingredients. The food is more healthful, and we don't ingest all those chemicals that we cannot pronounce and all that unnecessary salt and sugar. Less can be more when we learn from our contemplative friends, the Quakers. Their faith is less social and more reflective. Pentecostals all speak at the same time. Lutherans take turns as they follow a bulletin, and Quakers spend more time listening and reflecting. Pentecostals find God in a shout. Lutherans find Jesus in the Word and Sacrament, and Quakers find God in quiet reflection. Lutherans are reflective, but it is a string in our violins that isn't played that frequently. I once remarked to a choir director of how beautiful the choir music sounded when I closed my eyes and listened. She said, when we only listen, we are not distracted from what we see around us and hear the music more fully. I was watching the Red Green Show, where Red explains that men see relationships like cars and women see relationships like gardening. Probably because women like gardening and men like cars. Red said, when something goes wrong in a relationship, women want to dig deeper and find the root of the problem, while men expect 5 good years out of a car, then they want to trade up. Let us be like gardeners on this one and dig deeper into the inward soil of contemplation, reflection, and prayer. As we reluctantly enter this Sabbath caused by the pandemic, the spiritual disciplines of contemplation, reflection, and prayer work well and safely as we shelter in place. In this limited time of social interaction, let us grow inwardly as we seek God in solitude, and let us grow outwardly as we engage our brothers and sisters safely and digitally. Go inwardly, go digitally, go creatively. Often, when God engaged the world in a spectacular manner, God was creative, playing on one string. When God wanted to create an Easter moment, he summoned a stinky friend from his grave. When God wanted to display the greatest gift, he took all the money from a poor woman. When God wanted an army, he sent Gideon with a few men, lamps, and trumpets. When God wanted to defeat a giant, he took a small boy with an enormous heart. When God wanted to start a reformation, he brought fear into the heart of a young Luther riding a horse. When God wanted to feed 5,000 people, he took the meal of a child. You don't need to ride a horse in a storm. You don't need to borrow a penny from the poor. You don't need to buy lamps or trumpets or sardines or barley loaves. You don't need a bow and a string, and you don't need to visit a stinky friend. Be creative, go forth, go inside, go digital, and be the church. Amen.